proposed by Max Weber. And then in the last section of our lecture, I'll show you the research result of mine. I have done my research in Jogja, where microfinance institutes have done a lot of businesses there. I tried to find out some microfinance institutes in Bandung, but there seems to be not that many institutions have been established in Bandung. But compared to West Java, I think these institutions in Central and East Java are far more active. So I show you some of my research results and we'll discuss the topic of today. And at first, let's try to examine existing studies on the relationship between religion and economic developments. And a lot of scholars have emphasized the negative impacts of religion on economic developments. And these are some of the reasons why they think religion does not facilitate the growth of economic conditions of the people. And I divide it into two. First is religious teachings, and the second is religious practices. In terms of religious teachings, they say that religion emphasized some sort of fatalism. In the case of Indonesia, we call it the concepts like nerima or rezeki. So the scholars say that the concept of fate in religion prevents initiatives for economic development. If I quote from a book written by Parkinson, it says, the Malay refers to people in Malaysia. So the Malay is very prone to give up striving because they think it is the will of God. So in economic affairs, this is most clearly seen in the concept of rezeki, a person's divinely inspired luck. Such an attitude constitutes a significant drag on economic development. That's a very brief quote from a scholar who had done research in rural Malaysia. So they think, anyway, the will of God is emphasized in religion, so people do not try to overcome the difficulties. They tend to accept what they do have. So in that sense, some sort of entrepreneurships or a very active participation are quite difficult to find among those who stick to their religious teachings. That was one of the key concepts why religion does not bring positive impacts on economic development. And secondly, we can talk about asceticism and in some sense mysticism. So as you may know, in Indonesia, for example, we have a lot of sects and small religious groups who does not focus on affairs in this world, but they focus more on things afterward. So the argument goes that religion prioritizes the hereafter over worldly affairs. So this sort of attitude brings an attitude of anti-materialism. So when we think about our life in the hereafter, then efforts to improve our economic condition in this world, it is not considered to be important. For them, what is more significant affairs in this world is to pursue religious actions which have been encouraged by God. It's something like that, the argument is. And you may not be unfamiliar with this sort of argument. And in most of religion, we have messianism. So we are waiting for changes rather than becoming its active vehicles. So these are some of the arguments that most of religion have the sort of ideas, messianic ideas, ascetic ideas. So when we are imbued with these sort of ideas, then the active appropriation of world affairs is not encouraged so much compared to the ideas which is quite secular or based on different motivational thinking. And secondly, we can talk about religious practices. So this is the picture. As you may see in Thailand or in Myanmar, people usually buy some gold leaves to attach to the statue of Buddha. So in that sense, some scholars find out that religious spendings in these countries are huge. So their wealth is used for non-economic purposes, such as giving alms, festivals, and in some cases, some scholars focused on, in the case of Islam, pilgrims to Mecca. So they think that these activities, actions encouraged in religion usually prevent the accumulation of wealth. The wealth should be accumulated for economic purposes, for further investment. But in these countries, wealth is consumed for non-economic purposes. So I quote Van den Maden, who wrote on the relationship between religion and modernization in Southeast Asia. And he said that in Buddhist societies, economically dysfunctional expenditures include alms to monks, building or repairing religious edifices, ceremonies, and festivals. The wealthier the individual is, the more he is expected to spend his treasure on his faith. So it's something, the thesis is something like that. If you obtain wealth, then these are not used for further investment in the economic field. The people spend their wealth for religious festivals, almsgivings, and others. So in this sense, religious practices prevent the accumulation of wealth. That's the argument of these scholars. And some of them focused on the time and energy. So we know that people who are pious, they spend a lot of time for non-economic purposes. So the young people in Buddhist countries, they expect to go to the temple for quite some time in their 20s. So in that sense, when you spend your time in the temple, or in the case of Islam, a month-long fasting, these are the time which could not be used for economic purposes. So people's time and energy have spent for non-religious purposes, and these are the factors which hinder the concentration of time and energy for economic activities. And Some of them said that religion restricts some economic activities. So, for example, in Buddhist ideas, there is prohibitions against the taking of life. You should be very cautious not to kill animals. And in Islamic countries, we know that there are some prohibitions on alcohol and interest in bank. So in this sense, people cannot go into that sectors of economy, and these sectors could not be developed. So these are some of the ideas why religion negatively impacts on economic development. And in the case of Islam, we have some negative views from those who are called the Orientalists. So they do not evaluate appropriately Islam, but they have very narrowed views on Islamic teachings. So they usually say that the Sharia in general is counterproductive economically because it is less efficient than the Western economic norms. And there are some of the Sharias which are enumerated by these Orientalists as factors to hinder economic development. So they usually could not understand the prohibition of interest in bank. So interest is very important for the development of financial institution in Western countries. So without the system of Western bank, Islamic countries cannot properly follow the road to economic development. And they think the zakat is also problematic because, anyway, there should be some money for development. But as I said before, zakat disperse the money to the poor, and it cannot be used for investment. So in that sense, zakat is also negatively impacts on economic development. And yes, by prayers and fasting, the time and energy are spent for non-religious activities. And I was a bit curious, why do they point out polygamy? Yet there are not many people who actually practice polygamy in Islamic countries. But anyway, polygamy is permitted in Islamic teaching. And the Orientalists argue that when people do carry out polygamy, their wealth cannot be accumulated. So when we just think about inheritance, because there are many wives and many children, the wealth one accumulated cannot be inherited to a small number of children, but they should be dispersed to a lot. So in that sense, the Orientalists argue that polygamy could operate negatively against the economic development. And there are some who talked about Arabic values. So in the Middle East, we found out that we can easily find out that the Arabics usually put emphasis on blood ties. And they say that in order for capitalism to development, the blood ties brings some negative impact, because for the development of capitalism, we have to have some sort of trust, anonymous trust, not based on blood ties, but based on contracts or something like that. But because Arabic people emphasized blood ties, then there may be lack of trust among people, among the traders, among the producers, without this sort of ties. So there is a scholar who boldly said that Islam is negatively associated with attitudes that are conducive to economic development, economic growth. And one of the arguments that they propose is that in the world, it is difficult to find out industrialized Islamic countries. So on the left side of the slide, we can see that the countries which have the highest per capita income in the world. And among the 20 highest countries, it is difficult to find out Islamic countries. And Qatar is the only one who belongs to the top 20, actually at the 9th. But as you, excuse me, but as you can see, Qatar is not that big country, and their major income does not come from industries. Yeah, it comes from oil, it comes from natural resources, and it comes from trade or something like that. And it is a very small country. So when we look at the 30 industrialized countries in the world, as you can see on the right side of the slide, yeah, there is no Islamic countries. We have Australia, something like Finland, Israel, and Netherlands, or yeah, South Korea belongs to United Kingdom, Taiwan, but there is no Islamic countries. The strongest, the Islamic country which has the strongest industrialized sector is Malaysia and Indonesia. So in the Middle East or North Africa, Islamic country has not properly developed industrialization. So in this sense, the Orientalists say that Islam cannot promote properly economic development that have been achieved by Western and in some sense Eastern countries. So that's the usual picture that people usually think about the relationship between religion and economic development. So in these Western countries, of course, there are some religious persons, but the influence of religion in their everyday life has been limited. So in that sense, we can say the secularized countries in the West is far better than those countries emphasizing religion in everyday life. So we now have a question for today. So is religion, and especially because I'm gonna talk about Islam. Is religion an obstacle to economic development? So I hope at the end of our lecture we might have some view on this question, and we'll think about the relationship between religion and economic development later. So before we start the next part, are there anyone in our class who can say anything about this question from your experience? Do you think that your own religion blocks, prevents your hardworking or the accumulation of money, wealth, or anything else. If there are someone who have any comments or any thought, yeah, please.
Okay, student, are there any comment?
Yeah, from my experience in the previous week, I know that you are quite active in expressing yourself. So yeah, it's early morning, but anyway, yeah, we can say something about this issue. So I have shown you some of the ideas of those who think negatively on religion. But I think, yeah, we know that there are some factors, as I said before, some mystical or some messianic ideas in religion. But Ayo, yeah, whatever language is permitted, you can use Korean or you can use Indonesian.
Yes, I think let them choose. If they are worried to answer it in English, then let them answer it in Bahasa. Is it okay, Pak Kim? Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Sundanese is okay.
Okay.
Sundanese
Even if
too.
I cannot understand yet, I can.
Okay. Discussion or comment?
Yeah.
Saya mungkin.
Aryo, okay.
Oh, Mas Aryo, yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with some of the statement yang kayak consuming time and energy for non-economic activities itu mungkin ada di memang ada di agama Islam gitu mungkin menurut saya, dan menurut saya Islam sendiri mungkin tidak membatasi orangnya untuk hanya fokus ke agamanya dan meninggalkan aktivitas ekonominya segala macam, tapi mungkin di beberapa kasus yang saya rasakan di pengalaman saya sendiri, ada orang-orang yang mungkin merasa mungkin itu sih pakai waktu untuk melaksanakan ibadahnya itu lebih banyak mungkin dibandingkan dia untuk mencari duit lebih banyak atau mungkin mencari menambah ekonomi ke keluarganya, seperti itu sih Pak. Tapi ya saya mungkin setuju, cuman mungkin belum terlalu melihat ke arah sana gitu. Seperti itu sih.
Ya, jadi dulu pernah, ya saya pikir Pak Mas Aryo memberi masukan yang luar biasa. Jadi saya ingat bahwa dulu saya pernah membawa teman-teman dari Korea ke Indonesia, dan mereka bilang ya kita ya melihat kondisi universitas di Indonesia, dan mereka bilang, kok kenapa begitu banyak universitas berhubungan dengan Islam? So we have a lot of universitas Islam Indonesia, di Jakarta, di Jogja, di Bandung. I think it is also now changed. The EIN has changed it into WIN. So in that sense, the foreigners think that there are too many Islamic universities in Indonesia. So how can you develop some sort of higher knowledge, which is relatively free from religious teaching and religious learning? So in that sense, I think what Mas Aryo has taught is very important. So there are some who focus more on religious life rather than what we call very active engagement with the material world. Yes, that's a very good idea. So you can say either in Sundanese, Indonesian, English, yeah. And there might be some who can say something in Korean too. Yes, please.
So there's a comment here. in the chat from Sadira. He
Yeah.
said, well, I think Indonesia has different perspectives about this economic development because they are more focused on life after life rather than living in the material world. So I think the concept is different meaning of human endeavor. They don't try to accumulate wealth in terms of material, but they want to save it for the life after.
Mhm.
So that's from Sadira.
Yeah, I think Sadira's idea is very good because in the lecture and the argument later is focused on an idea that economic development is something good, something that we have to follow. That's the basic premise of today's lecture and the arguments that scholars have proposed. But we have to, of course, we have to think whether economic development, material well-being, growth, wealth, rich, whether these are should be the basic goal of our life. As you said, we have to think about our life after death. We have to think about our life, which is more humane rather than material. So in that sense, the perspective can be changed if we think about whether economic development is the best option for us or not. But today's lecture is based on the idea that we are trying to improve our economic condition. So that's the basic idea. And based on these ideas, whether religion can be used, religion is negatively impact on economic development or not. So, but still, I think the idea whether religious development or growth in GDP per capita is the prime goal of our life. So I think that's a different question, but still very meaningful to understand the arguments that have been made by scholars. Thank you for your wonderful idea. Okay, so we have ideas, masukan from Sadira dan Mas Aryo. Then we will go further. We know the figure, the sociologist, and he also impacted a lot on anthropological learning. We have, Max Weber, and he wrote a book entitled The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. So Max Weber, the great scholar, has once said that religion can positively affect economic performance by strengthening capitalistic spirit. So for Max Weber, capitalism could not work properly at the early stage of its development back in 18th and 19th century without assistance from Protestantism, from the religious ideas. So for him, Protestant ethic, he did not use Protestantism or Protestant ideas, but he specifically point out Protestant ethic. So whether it is 100% religious or not is slightly questionable, but anyway, it is based on, the ethic is based on Protestantism. So according to his view, after the Reformation of Catholicism, which means that before the Reformation, the Catholic priest could determine whether someone will go to heaven or hell after death. They had some sort of very authoritative power to, for example, erase one's sins or something like that. They also sold some sort of tickets to heaven or something like that. It was the Catholicism before Reformation. But after the Reformation of Catholicism, people, because they cannot get advice or get priest determination whether they will be placed in the heaven or hell. So people did not know whether he would be saved by God or not. So that was the situation after the Reformation of Catholicism that Max Weber had pointed out. So people were quite uncertain about their future in the hereafter. So they tried to find out some ways to be certain whether they will be saved or not. So at the time, the economic success could be assigned to believe that he or she would be placed into heaven. So among other various factors, people wanted to be certain their future, and they, because of the Protestant ethic, what according to Max Weber, people think the economic success in this world could give them an assurance that they will be saved in the future. So the Protestant ethic, which Max Weber pointed out, included hardworking, simple, and not extravagant life. So in that sense, Protestant ethic teaches you to work hard, and you don't spend your money for money for nothing. You have to be you have to live a simple life, and you should not spend your money for your own pleasure or something like that. These are the Protestant teachings that have been reformed by Calvin or Luther or something like that. So these sort of Protestant ethics laid the foundation for capitalist development in Europe. So before the Reformation of Catholicism, there were also a seed of capitalistic development. But for Max Weber, what is the most important factor in the development of capitalism was the accumulation of capital. So the more you have capital, the bigger you could make some industries or some companies or something like that. So for Max Weber, what is the most important factor in the development of capitalism is accumulation of capital, and Protestantism encourages people to save money rather than spend money. So in that sense, he says that Protestantism conducively impacts on economic development in the West. So from his view, we can say that, yeah, there is a scholar who said that religion can help economic development, something like that. And these are some of the arguments proposed by those who say that religion positively impacts on economic development. So they say that religion can help to increase productivity first by cultivating traits such as honesty, work ethic, and thrift. Yes, we know that every religion emphasized honesty, and every religion encouraged people to work hard and not to spend money for pleasure or for non for overconsumption or something like that. And we know that religion usually emphasized learning. Religion put high value on knowledge, and this encouraged people to get more education. And also we can find that religion established, emphasized attitudes which are conducive to economic development, such as cooperation, the rule of law, and sense of trust. So these are the arguments which are contrary to the previous one that we have discussed before. So there are someone who say that religion encourages people to spend money for non-economic economic purposes, but there are also someone who say that because religion emphasizes thrift, honest, and simple life, so you are not taught to spend your money recklessly or to enjoy your life or something like that. And there are also some scholars who discussed about the teachings of compensation, namely that if you carry out your religious activities in this world, later in the hereafter, you may be compensated. So previously, someone says that because of that idea of compensation, people do not engage actively in economic activities. That was one interpretation, but we can find out another interpretation saying that this sort of teachings motivate people to work hard, like as Max Weber has said, in order to be saved in the hereafter, you have to work hard and you have to use your wealth for good purposes. So in that sense, the scholars who supported the idea that religion positively impact on economic development, they also have something that can say about the importance, significance of religion in encouraging people work hard, save money, and some sort of cooperation among the same religious persons or something like that. So in that sense, we have two contrasting views which use the same religious teachings but put different interpretation on them. So these are the discussions of scholars who have done research on the relationship between religion and economic development. So today I will give my research result on the issue related to relationship between economy and religion. And the topic of today's lecture is microfinance, small financial activities among the poor, among those who live in the rural areas. And among the developmental specialists, it is said that microfinance is very important because usually the commercial banks, the big banks, usually they do not want to lend money to the poor because the poor usually do not have collaterals. Collaterals means their guarantee of repayment, something like house or something like that. And in order to communicate, in order to work with the poor, the cost of transaction is very high because they usually just, for example, when we save money, the amount of money that they can save is just a small bit. So the big bank usually do not like to transact with the poor. So in that sense, microfinance can help these people under low income can have access to financial resources. So these small-scale loans can be used to empower the poor with entrepreneurship. So they can invest such a small, whether it be a small amount of loans, they can use it for their businesses. And microfinance can provide a cushion against economic fluctuations. So in the case of the poor, because they are lack of proper capital, so when there's some small amount of fluctuation, small amount of negative situation, their businesses could be collapsed. So in this sense, they need some sort of cushion which could lessen negative impacts from outside. And these could be provided by microfinance. And usually the microfinance provided not only funds, but they also provide some sort of training courses and some sort of meetings among their customers. So while participating in the microfinance, people feel a sense of community, and they encourage do some mutual assistance activities. So in that sense, some people say that microfinance is the best way to promote economic development among the poor in the rural areas. So we know that there are heaps of cases of microfinances which help to bring economic growth among the poor in other parts of Indonesia, other parts of the world. You may have heard about the Grameen microfinance, which won Nobel Prize about 20 years ago in Bangladesh. So it was a very famous activity, Grameen Bank, and they use small loans to promote small businesses and among the Bangladesh people in rural areas. So in Indonesia, we can see that small microfinance institutions have worked actively since the late 20th century. Yeah, and now it has a lot. And today, the microfinance that I would like to discuss is not the usual one, but it is microfinance based on Islam. So you might have heard BMT, BMT in Indonesian. It is the abbreviation of Baitul Mal wa Tamil, so Islamic micro institutions. And as you can see, Islamic banks, Islamic financial institution was permitted under Suharto government in early 1990s. So when Islamic Bank was founded, at the time, the small Islamic microfinance institutions called BMT was also started in the early 1990s. And you can see the number of BMT in Indonesia, and it has grown rapidly in the 1990s and 20s. So you can see, about 2000, we have 2000 BMTs in Indonesia, and in the year 2010, we can see about 30,500 BMTs in Indonesia. So BMT has grown rapidly until the mid 2000s, but after 2010, we can find out some sort of stagnation. The growth has slowed down. So the number of BMT was not growing fast in the last 10 years, but it still grows. So because the BMT's growth has been slowed down, a lot of people started to find out reasons why BMT has not grown so rapidly. And as we can see, there comes a lot of criticisms from both sides, from financial specialists and at the same time from Islamic scholars. And we will see first the criticisms from financial specialists. Yeah, they are economists usually. And they say that in Indonesia, we don't have government supervision and external audit to BMT, which means that BMT can freely do their business, which means that some sort of moral hazards and some sort of technical problems happened among BMT, and it blocked the growth of BMT in Indonesia. And the transaction fee is too high, and BMT does not have human resources with managerial knowledge, and BMT has limited external fundings. And as you may see, if we deposit money into BMT, it is not guaranteed by the government, which means that if the BMT is bankrupt, your money has gone, is gone. So in that sense, if we deposit money to banks, BNI or Bank Central Asia or something like that, even if the bank goes bankrupt, your money is still guaranteed by the government. So you don't need to worry about the bankruptcy. But in the case of BMT, you have to worry about that because BMT goes bankrupt, then your money also disappears. So this problem of trust blocks the development of BMT is the argument of financial specialists. And as you said, there are because thousands of BMTs in Indonesia, so competition among them is too tough. So these are the reasons pointed out by the financial specialists as factors hindering the growth of BMT in Indonesia. And there were also criticisms from Islamic scholars. They say that BMT put emphasis on profit over economic empowerment of Muslims. So Islamic scholars say that the basic purpose of BMT is not gain profit, but they have to support economic empowerment of Muslims. But Islamic scholars criticize that these days BMT put more emphasis on profit. They do not have intention to help assist poor Muslims. So there was a criticism from Islamic scholars. And the next one is a bit difficult to understand. If you are familiar with Islamic teachings, then it might be okay. But if you're not, yeah, it's a bit difficult. But anyway, Islamic ways of transaction, which is permitted by Sharia, is called murabaha or mudaraba, musharaka, something like that. So the most ideal way of transaction, financial transaction in Islamic teaching is called mudaraba and musharaka. It is something like profit sharing between BMT and its customers. A system which is permitted but is not that ideal is called murabaha, and it is not based on profit sharing, but it is based on the principle of buying and selling with margin. So the PMD buys what goods and sells the goods to the customers. It's something like, it's just like trading activities, but it is permitted by Sharia. So the Islamic scholars argue that PMD depends heavily on murabaha rather than mudaraba and musharaka, which means that the ideal ways of transaction are not that frequently used by PMD. And there are also criticisms which say that practice of murabaha by PMD is not compliant with Sharia because it is profit-oriented. So the spirit of Sharia is not properly applied to the practice of PMT. So there is a scholar who said boldly that PMT does not satisfy the general rules of trade specified in Sharia, and it also does not satisfy the specific rules required for murabaha. So in this sense, PMT has been faced by two criticisms, both from financial specialists and from Islamic scholars. So there are heaps of problems, it seems, at first to me, before I started my research, there are heaps of problems faced by PMD. So I started my research with these criticisms from Islamic and financial specialists. So these are the pictures taken from my research on BMT in Jogja. It was done before coronavirus, so I was lucky enough to visit and interview with people in the markets and in the BMT. So the object of research that is the BMT that I selected for my research is called BMT beef. Yeah, I forgot what's the original name of beef, but anyway, it is called beef. Yes, sorry, but anyhow, it is a BMT which has the largest assets in Jogja. It was established in 1996, and at that time the capital of the BMT was just $10 million, 10 juta, but it has grown into a stable financial institutions in the 2010s. So if we look at just the numbers, the growth rate of BMT is extraordinary. So we can see that average net income growth rate between 1998 to 2019 for 20 years, the average growth rate was 50-70% per annum. So every year the growth rate has been 57%. And then average asset growth was also extraordinary. So it has been 44% annually. So the assets of BMT BIF in 2018 was 96 billion, is something like 96 miliar, and the capital was 7 miliar, and the net profit was 1.4 million. And the employees has increased from 9 to 69, and it now has 10 branches, and the clients were customers were 30,000, and it was a very small BMT in the 1990s, and it becomes one of the biggest one in Jogja now. So if we just look at the numbers, the asset growth and capital and profit growth, yeah, it goes, sours. So you can see that hips an extraordinary growth in their assets and capitals and profits. So I try to look at what have been the factors supporting such a rapid growth of BMT beef, and I found some interesting. Before that's the major method of transaction. I think it is usual for almost all BMT in Indonesia. So the main method is called Simput Bola. So the BMT staff visit customers to collect deposits and payments. There are some offices, so you can go directly to the offices, like banks, transactions in bank, but usually, as you can see, the BMT staff come to the customers to collect deposits and to get payments, something like that. So that's the BMT steps that I followed while I did my research in Jogja. So there were various strengths the BMT have, and among them, I think the most important is their religious one. The institute BMT was quite religious, and I was surprised because it works in the financial sector, which means that every day, they deal with money. So in that sense, I thought the religious ideas may not be that strong, even if they use transaction methods based on Sharia. But I think that apart from that, besides from that basic rules, the religious atmosphere may not be found in the activities of BMT. That was my assumption before I did my research. But my assumption was turned out to be totally wrong. So it was a bit strange institution. They deal with money, but at the time, I could find out some sort of religious atmosphere in the buildings and in their routine activities. So I termed it religious spirit. The BMT is full of religious spirit. So when I did my interview with BMT staffs, they say that most of them said that the main problems of Indonesian Muslim is economic powerlessness. So they say that when Umat Islam, the Islamic community in Indonesia, overcome economic powerlessness, then the Islamic community can obtain prosperous and at the same time Islamic community in Indonesia or something like that. So they say that the purpose of BMT is support economic powerness, in empowering Muslims, the poor Muslims, so that Islamic society can be more prosperous, which eventually brings the realization of ideal Islamic community. So they say that the goal of BMT is to realize Islamic values, and you may not heard about this sort of idea, but they work in BMT, and they say that their activities or their working in BMT is something like worship, ibadah, dan dakwah, they say. And some of them say that they are dying. They are not what karyawan of financial institute, but they think they are dying. So they do their ibadah and da'wah in their offices. It is something like the view they want to propose. And because the interview was done in Indonesia, I did not translate the contents of my interview with one of the staff. And the staff said, saya bekerja di PMT hanya selama 3 tahun. Sepengetahuan saya mempercayai transaksi keuangan berdasarkan syariah Islam. Yeah, that's a usual comment. So I think, yeah, okay, yeah. That he's quite good at Islamic teaching. And after that, he gave me a very surprising comment. Belum lama itu, ini saya ditawari posisi oleh bank swasta. Tapi dia tidak menerimanya karena bank swasta tidak memenuhi syariah Islam. Saya memilih BMT untuk bekerja karena saya sangat percaya dengan manfaat syariah. So at the time, back about 3 years ago, the staff who gave me this interview data earned around 2 million rupiah. Dia earning dia dapat sekitar 2 juta setiap bulan. But he said that if he transferred to private bank, they offer him about 6 to 7 million. 7 juta. Artinya gajinya dia bisa berlipat 3 kali. So I was a bit surprised because he was ordinary karyawan staff, and he did not seem to be very good at Islamic teaching. He does not use Arabic words, because when I meet some top officers in BMT, they enjoy putting some Arabic words to explain their operation. But in the case of him, the staff who gave me this interview, he was not that good at Islamic knowledge, and he was from ordinary university. So he specialized in finance in private university, and he happened to get a job in BMT here. But for 3 years, he has changed it. So he said that even if someone offered a job with higher income, if the work is not based on Islamic Sharia principles, then he does not want to get the job offer. So I was surprised that the staffs here were full of ideas based on Islamic teaching. So in this sense, because they think they are doing some worship and missionary works, and they are dying of BMT, in this sense, they were working very hard, and they were honest, and they were committed to their work. They think, yeah, on the one hand, they earn money from their work, but on the other, they think their work can help to improve Islamic community in Indonesia, something like that. So I think religious spirit, they have helped them to carry out their activity efficiently, honestly, and with a strong commitment. And secondly, the BMT, the Baitul Mal is and Tamwil. Tamwil is business, and Mal is, as you know, something like donation. So the BMT that I have researched considers charity as its main activities. So budgets for charity have continued to increase, reaching more than 420 million in 2015, and it is more than 2 billion to a million in 2019, 18. And I put it this one because when they get profit, they use some of the profits for what? Charity activities, donations for the poor or something like that. So their religious spirit can be strengthened by this sort of charity work. So all of the steps, they know that the BMT obtained a lot of profit from their transactions. And they also know that part of the profit is used for charity work. So in that sense, they can maintain their religious spirit because some of their works, some of their profits, some of the results of their works, namely the profits, can be used for religious purposes rather than being concentrated by a few top officials. So in that sense, I think Baitulma, the activity of Baitulma can give them some motivations to work harder. And the third thing that I would like to propose is BMT PIF has some operational procedures which are based on religious values. So the problem, all of the financial institutions, the most serious problem is bad debt, bad loans. That they give money to the customers, and the customers does not pay their debt back, which means that the institution does not have profit, and they have to face loss. So the BMT in Jogja have to deal with bad loans, and when they do to find out ways to deal with bad loans, they are saying they are using family approach. Yeah, so consultation to win the trust of customers. So this is the internet data from the field. So they are saying that even if the customers do not pay back their loans, they maintain the procedures of family approach rather than abruptly menita parang. So yes, I read some of the code though. So he said that strategi utamanya adalah pendekatan kekeluargaan, negosiasi. So jadi saat debitor harus mengembalikan 100.000 sebulan, kami bernegosiasi dengan mereka. Bagaimana dengan misalnya 50 atau ya lalu, something like that. So hasil musyawarah lah tergantung pada tanggapan para pelanggar. Tapi kami tetap menggunakan pendekatan kekeluargaan. Jadi kami berkomunikasi dengan mereka dengan sabar. Jadi jika masalah tidak dapat diselesaikan, kami tidak meminta agunan. Namun kami mengandalkan pendekatan yang sama untuk mengunjungi debitur, untuk berkomunikasi dengan mereka. Ya, jadi kami sering mengunjungi dan berbicara dengan mereka. Jadi saya pernah mengikuti salah satu staff yang pergi ke orang yang tidak bisa membayar, dan orang yang tidak bisa membayar, dia bilang, wah itu prosedurnya selama setahun lebih, jadi dia membayar cuma sedikit dan diskusi dengan staff dari kantor ya itu bisa berjalan lebih dari setahun. Artinya, this sort of operation, it becomes a strength of PMT here because they care. It gives an impression that they care about the customers. They do not enforce people. So, as I said before, trust is very important for PMT because they do not have deposit guarantee scheme. So you cannot, if the PMT bankrupt, the customers also goes bankrupt. So in that sense, trust is very important. And one of the ways to strengthen the sort of trust among the customers is strategy like this, family approach. Yeah, you are familiar with this sort of mushawara and something like family approach, but it is difficult to actually put in practice these practices in the field. But what I found was that, yeah, I've met some customers and they say that we do not have any enforcing mechanisms, no strength, but we use a very family approach, and we just discuss. And if we have problems, the steps try to understand the situation of mind. So in this sense, I think this sort of operational procedures based on religious values have brings trust among customers, which eventually brings a very positive impacts on the performance of PMT. Sorry, it's a bit confusing. And lastly, the PMT heavily use religious network. So trust in PMT is enhanced by religious networks such as mosque, religious leaders, and religious NGOs. So PMT is fully incorporated with religious persons in the areas. So they have consultation with Islamic leaders, and they frequently visit mosque, and they frequently donate something to mosque, and they frequently get something from the mosque. And here the religious NGOs is something like NU or Muhammadiyah, so the big religious organizations in Indonesia. So this is an interview with a customer who says that saya seorang Muslim dan PMT BIF dimiliki oleh sebuah lembaga Islam. Jadi saya percaya sepenuhnya, meskipun simpanan tidak dilindungi oleh negara. Saya memiliki kepercayaan penuh pada PMT yang dijalankan oleh umat Islam yang terpercaya. Mereka ditujukan bukan untuk mengejar keuntungan, tetapi untuk membantu orang lain. Itu sebabnya saya melakukan penyetoran. Ini pendapat saya sebagai seorang Muslim. So when I met some customers, some depositors, yeah, I always ask them, yeah, if the beef goes bankrupt, then your money will disappear. And they say that, oh, of course not. They never thought that PMT beef won't return their deposit. So even if there was someone who said that even if the PMT beef goes bankrupt, those officials who supported, who founded PMT beef would return their deposit afterwards. Even if the institution has gone, the person who founded the PMT would return their deposit, so that he did not worry about his money would disappear in PMT BIF. So some of the high officials, the director and head of the sections, they are actually giving religious sermons to the mosque. They are very important religious persons. So people have trust in them. And because of this sort of trust, they also trust in the operation of BMD. So these are the 4 aspects that I have found from the field. That is, I read some of the summaries of my research, and these are the last slide. So we have today some time to discuss later. So I think religious values are the main factors for the success of BMD. They have, among their staff, they have religious spirits. So in order to strengthen it, they do religious sermons every week, and actually every day before they start their business, they read Quran together or something like that. So the institution is filled with religious spirits, and they think they are doing some religious work, ibadah, and they represent Islamic community as Dai and something like that. So the staffs are aware that the purpose of their work is for the Ummah. Of course, they work and they get wages, and they can, with that wages, they can live. They can feed their children, but still, at the same time, they think their work is religious. It's a mission to improve economic condition of the Islamic community. So in this sense, I think when we talk about Islamic economies, the development of Islamic economies, not only in the finance, but in the production sector, we should not limit our question to how efficiently and profitably business is managed. That's the question which are usually asked by the economists or financial specialists. They think you should make the business efficient and profitable so that you can accumulate capital, and these can be used for the growth of business. But I think when we talk about Islamic economies in the Islamic countries, of course, we have to think about efficiency and profitability, but we have to also think of a religious aspect. So to me, the development of Islamic economy should include such questions as how Islamic institutions can attract trust and support of Muslims, and how effectively they utilize Islamic Muslim networks, and how strongly they are committed to realizing Islamic values and goals. So, as I said before, hardworking and your responsibility toward other Muslims or something like that, Islamic values can bring positive impacts on the performance of Islamic financial institutions. So the final argument of my research was that Islamic values and spirit can be one of the major factors accelerating economic development. That was the idea that I have drawn from my research among BMD in Jogja. So Islam can, in some sense, can be a factor hindering economic development. But in other sense, when religious teaching can be properly understood and practiced, it can bring economic success. The success of BMD, BIF, cannot be separated from Islam. It is based on Islam, and it can be prosper, it can be successful because people of the BMD and people transact with BMD are filled with Islamic spirit, and their trust is based on Islamic teachings or something like that. So in that sense, what I said today is just one example. Yeah, it is just one case, but still, I think it has some relevance, because even if it is just one case, it demonstrates how Islam can be used to the development of quite Western and capitalistic institution of microfinance. Yes, that's the end of what I have prepared for today. And because we have some time, I don't know why, but compared to my previous lecture in the last week, we have a bit of time to discuss the material that I have presented today. Anyway, thank you for listening. And now, we may discuss freely. Yeah, Parimbo, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Pak Kim. That's really amazing lectures, I think. And yeah, perhaps we can start our discussion. Is there any one of you who would like to ask question or comment to Pak Kim? I think I'm afraid. I think the issue is really familiar to us. Some of us perhaps might be a client of a BMT or something. But anyway, let's hear some of the comment. Student?
Yes, questions and comments and any ideas, masukan, ya apapun.
Okay. Sadira, would you like to do it yourself? Sadira? Oh, actually, this is a question from Sadira. Excuse me,
okay.
sir. Okay,
Hello.
do it yourself
Let
then.
me just. Okay. So hello, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
And do you think that BMT is one kind of institution? I don't know. Is that an institution? Institution or some kind else? But BMT is one kind of institution that leads to an incitement in terms of economic development in Indonesia. Jadi semacam kayak penghasutan untuk mengikuti syariat Islam. Jadi itu men-stop untuk pengembangan di global atau gimana tuh? What do you think about that, sir?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. And as I said before, I think microfinance is quite important for us to think about economic development in rural areas. So I'm not sure, but you may not be that familiar with life in rural areas. And there, when I did my research in Jogja, it was about 20 more years ago. But at the time, a small amount of money can be useful for someone to open their business. Yeah, if we open our business in urban areas, you have to pay rent, or everything is expensive in urban areas. But in rural areas, in order to open a small, for example, small process food, small space for processing food. I think just 100, 200, and kalau sekarang ya 1 juta, 2 juta itu sudah cukup untuk membuka sesuatu usaha yang kecil. And to those who are living in urban areas in the city, ya 2 juta, 2 juta, 3 juta, that's not that big money. You can easily get one. But in the rural areas, but it is still money which is considered quite a lot. So the bank or the government cannot give them this sort of small money. It costs too much for them to, for example, the government provides some programs and they give it the small amount of money. Yeah, there are some programs, rural development programs, but I think in that case, for that sort of small money, because small money can encourage people carry out their economic activities in different field. So in that sense, I think finance, the microfinance, an institution which give a 2 or 3 millions to juta rupiah to people without anything, with just based on trust. So you just give them 2 or 3 jutas, and after that you ask them to pay it back little by little. I think that sort of system is quite efficient, effective to bring economic development in rural areas. So in that sense, I think BMD, microfinance institutions based on Islam, is also important in that sense. So they use their religious spirit so that they can give trust to the to those villagers who cannot afford banking services, or who cannot afford funds from government. So it is something like a vacant place which can be filled only by this sort of microfinance institutions. So in that sense, even if it is small, and the effects cannot be that dramatic, but still, to me, it is very important to bring economic development for the poor in rural urban areas. Yep, there is the question. There is the answer that I can say. Thanks for the question.
Okay. Anyone else? Class, please.
I think I want to comment.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, from John.
Nora-san.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. Like towards the end, I had a change of opinion, I guess, because like the first question is that is religion being an obstacle for economic development? But at first I thought like, I guess religion has its own downside, hence why it's an obstacle for economic development, because yeah, like I think the answers previously, like from Aryo and from Raka before, say that like, yeah, people don't really focus on like the material things, and even if they focus on like the material things, economic things, like they focus on like what's enough of them, so they don't like really think about like investing or even like saving money, simple things, but they focus on like, hey, at least today I have enough to eat, or I have clothes to wear, and they don't think about like the future, more to the future, but like just in the moment. And it's interesting that towards the end I felt like, okay, maybe religion does or can actually help economic development, but for like from the BNT and yeah, from like the BNT, and I can understand why people it's appealing for like small businesses to like go to BMT and like ask for their help, things like that. And because like, yeah, their approach is very friendly, you can say. They think they're like they see their customers family, and they don't like force them to like, if they cannot pay, I guess the small business thing, like, hey, at least I don't get my house confiscated or something, but at least they will just say, hey, can you pay this one? If I cannot pay, like they will give me time, and at least I won't lose my house or my business, things like that. And I guess that's the appeal. And I don't know, one question that I had in mind is that if I think we all should ask is that if along the way, organization or institution like BMT, something happened to them, or like along the way it just doesn't work, is it like is that a fault in the religion, or like the people in the institution themselves that's wrong there's something wrong with them, if in their how they manage their institution, or how they maybe misinterpret the religion themselves, or like, yeah, I think that's a question that I guess I will be asking if something along the way happened, like, because I guess if BMT just doesn't work, then I guess people will be less trustful towards religion, because like, okay, they use religion, but in the end, they're just another they just maybe they're liars, things like that. I think that's my comment for.
Yeah, that's a very important aspect that you have asked, and I was impressed by your very very fluent English, and you can talk so fast, and it was very clearly phrased. So I think Jonathan has a wonderful capability to be a member, to participate in English class. But anyway, the thing is that always the bad things always happened. So in the case of BMT that I have done my research, they also have bad. There also happened bad things. So, for example, those who get credit from the BMT could not pay it back. So that's a very usual things. And to me, they don't blame religion, but they don't blame anything. And what is funny was that actually I have met one customer who could not pay his debt to the BMT, and because of that he has to sell his motorbike in order to pay his debt to BMT. And actually, of course, if I could not pay my debts to bank, yeah, it was first my fault. But anyway, if I had to, for example, sell my house or sell my motorbike or bike or automobiles to pay my debt back, my feeling to that bank might not be good, even if it was my fault that I could not pay my debt back. But anyhow, I do not have a good feeling to the bank, which forced me to sell my motorbike. But when I meet some customer who could not pay his debt back, so who had to sell his motorbike to repay his debt, he said that, oh yeah, it was okay. And I was surprised, why? And he said that, to the process of selling his motorbike, it took the BMT waited for more than 1 year. So they kept talking about the debt he could not pay for more than a year. So the final solution that has been made between BMT and he himself was to sell his motorbike. He said that to sell his motorbike is something like his decision, not the BMT's decision. So in that sense, I think bad things always happened in the operation, in the process of BMT's operation. But because the process of settling down this bad situation is based on negotiation for quite a long time. So the bad feeling against BMT might not be that much compared to other situations. So in this sense, they do not blame religion, but they try to understand each other's situation. The BMT try to understand the customer's situation, and customer also try to understand BMT's condition. If BMT could not get BMT have a lot of bad loans, then BMT will bankrupt. The customer says something like that. He was thinking about the condition of BMT. So in that sense, I think close interaction or extensive interaction between the BMT and customers were the factors that prevents the appearance of bad things surrounding BMT. that could be the answer that I can say to Mas Jonathan. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Kim, for the answer. And it's interesting because like I rarely see like a very close relationship for like a economic institution and their customer, because usually it may be in the bank, like if you cannot pay for like forget a year, let alone like a few months, they will maybe just confiscate your house, your business, things like that. But for like to wait for a year and actually just negotiate and understand like each other's perspective, it's very amazing.
And these can be, I think, without Islamic ideas, without religious element, these cannot easily be happening. You are angry, or you are something like you are trying to enforce something, but why? Because negotiation can go months and even more than a year. Then both have some sort of mutual understanding, so they can consider each other, even if the customers are in a less advantageous positions. He or she was thinking about BM debt. So in order not to make BM debt bankrupt, they have to pay it back. So they have consciousness, something like that.
Well, that is interesting, Makin. Is there any data or information about non-performing loans of this BMT case?
Yes, I have, and it is less than 5%.
Oh, yeah.
5% is recommended by the government agency.
Mm-hmm.
And they could press it down less than 5%.
Well, that's okay. Anyone else? Plus?
Mungkin saya boleh, Pak Rimbo?
Yeah.
Okay, please, Audi.
Ya, saya bertanya atau berkomentar dalam bahasa Indonesia saja ya. Terima kasih tadi Pak Kim udah menyampaikan lecture-nya. Itu lumayan menarik dan insightful gitu untuk saya. Jadi kalau yang bisa saya simpulkan gitu, bahwa di Indonesia ini agama itu memiliki peran yang sangat penting dan sangat terikat dan mempengaruhi banyak aspek kehidupan di Indonesia. Tidak hanya dalam hal ekonomi dan development, tapi juga misalnya di hal-hal sosial gitu. Dan misalnya sebentar lagi kan sudah menjelang bulan Ramadan, di mana umat Islam diwajibkan untuk melaksanakan ibadah puasa. Tapi misalnya kalau ada seseorang gitu, dia orang Islam tapi tidak mengikuti praktik puasa yang seharusnya agama itu menjadi hubungan personal dan spiritual, tapi itu juga menjadi ada efek sosialnya, di mana misalnya kalau dia tidak berpuasa mungkin dia bisa dicemooh oleh orang-orang di sekitarnya, dia direndahkan lah gitu. Dan ini melihat kalau misalnya agama gitu, Islam di Indonesia tuh memang sudah tertanam dalam nilai-nilai kita sebagai orang Indonesia. Dan tadi kalau di awal sempat tentang kapitalistik spirit dari yang Max Weber itu disampaikan bahwa kesuksesan ekonomi itu bisa dilihat sebagai keberkahan yang diberikan Tuhan gitu kepada manusia. Tapi hal tersebut itu tidak secara penuh terjadi di Indonesia, dan bahkan orang Islam di Indonesia itu tidak melihat kekayaan atau kesuksesan secara ekonomi, finansial itu sebagai sebuah tujuan hidup, dan bahkan nggak percaya bahwa kekayaan itu adalah sebuah tanda-tanda keberkahan. Dan kalau saya melakukan observasi sendiri di sekitar saya tuh bahkan banyak yang menganggap kalau misalnya orang kaya itu bukannya menandakan dia adalah orang yang diberkati oleh Tuhan, tetapi lebih terlihat misalnya sombong atau frowned upon di depan masyarakat gitu. Misalnya dia langsung memiliki sebuah prasangka buruk, dia pasti mendapatkan kekayaan dia ini dengan cara yang haram atau bagaimana gitu. Ya kayak seperti itu, orang Indonesia mungkin memiliki kayak sikap prasangka yang buruk terlebih dahulu kepada orang. Apakah itu mungkin didasari oleh jealousy, iri terhadap orang tersebut atau bagaimana? Itu mungkin bisa jadi salah satu asalnya. Dan ya untuk yang tentang BMT beef itu saya tadi menemukan yang salah satu yang menarik bagi saya itu adalah interview Pak Kim dengan salah satu staf di mana dia ditawarkan posisi untuk bekerja di perusahaan swasta yang gajinya itu 3 kali lipat dibanding gaji dia sekarang, dari 2 juta sampai 6 sampai 7 juta. Apabila itu terjadi di negara lain misalnya, atau terjadi di kelompok masyarakat yang lain gitu, yang mungkin tidak memegang prinsip syariah Islam sebagai prinsip utama dalam hidupnya gitu, itu pertanyaan yang no brainer, tidak perlu dipikirkan lagi. Itu sudah 3 kali lipat gaji dia bila bekerja dengan BMT Beef. Berarti staf tersebut tidak menilai bahwa peningkatan gaji 3 kali lipat itu sebanding dengan prinsip yang sudah dia miliki. Dia sudah memiliki prinsip yang kuat dalam bekerja, di mana dia harus bekerja dengan dituntun dengan syariat-syariat Islam, dan dia nggak menganggap bahwa kesuksesan secara finansial itu adalah target dalam hidupnya gitu. Dan dia mungkin lebih mementingkan value-value yang dipegang oleh BMT Beef tadi, misalnya lebih membantu masyarakat dibandingkan mengambil profit gitu. Mungkin dari saya komentarnya seperti itu, Pak Kim, Pak Rimbo. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, dan saya sungguh gembira sekali kalau dengar dari komentar kawan Unpad, antropologi Unpad. Ya, semuanya ya terlalu bagus dan brilliant. Dan masalahnya mungkin saya 1 menit 2 menit lagi harus keluar, jadi mungkin ya itu komentarnya. Saya bisa sampaikan terakhir, dan itu apa Mas bicara itu semuanya penting, dan kita harus memikirkan apakah itu agama itu sungguh membawa dampak positif atau negatif. Menurut saya seperti Mas bicara, religion can be used contextually. So the same religious teaching among the Christians, among Muslims, can be used differently in different context. So in this sense, orang kaya di Indonesia dia dicemburui boleh, dan tapi di konteks yang lain orang kaya yang bisa mempertunjukkan kekeringannya dia untuk mendapat keuntungan, saya pikir itu bisa membawa penilaian yang beda. Jadi kita lebih tidak usah gimana, karena saya pikir banyak orang, khususnya orang Barat, mereka pikir ya karena ada religion Islam atau Buddhism, ya negara-negara di kawasan Asia atau ya Timur Tengah mereka tidak bisa memperkembangkan industri, something like that. Then what I'm saying is that this sort of idea is wrong, because we can find out cases which Islam can promote Islamic development or something like that. But on the other hand, we can find out other cases in Indonesia too. There may be some others who does not care about the poor or something like that. So in that sense, saya setuju dengan Mas bahwa ada kasusnya ya bisa bervariasi, bisa diinterpretasi differently. So saya banyak terima kasih dan saya minta maaf Mas Rimbo, Pak Jun dan Mbak Ati. Saya harus pamit dulu karena saya ada lecture yang lain. Yep.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Kim. Thank you for your lectures. This is incite us to discuss more. Actually, I have a question, but I put it for the next lectures. I think in 2 weeks we will meet you again with another topic. So thank you, Pak Kim. Have a nice day.
Yep, have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Kim.
Bye.
Thank you, Prof.
So, Ibu Wati, pertanyaannya tertunda.
Tertunda, biarin aja nanti saya japri aja.
Iya, saya juga ini ada.
Saya juga ada pertanyaan tadi.
Oke, Jo, bagus juga Jo. Terima kasih kamu sudah tanya ya. Dan juga siapa tadi Audi, Sadira sudah komen. Memang mungkin waktu kita memang ini Pak Kim sebelumnya sudah bilang bahwa hari Senin waktu dia itu agak mepet gitu. Dia sebetulnya punya hari yang agak longgar hari Selasa, tapi kita punya jadwal hari Senin rupanya. Dan itu mepet sekali waktu dia. Karena di Korea sekarang 2 jam lebih cepat, artinya itu juga masuk dalam jam makan siang sebetulnya. Dan istirahat, nah setelah itu dia ada kelas lain. Jadi kalau sekarang jam setengah 11, 11.30, setengah 12, berarti di sana udah setengah 2 siang begitu ya. Dan itu udah lewat jam makan siang dan dia harus ada kelas lain. Jadi memang waktu dia agak terbatas. Sampai minggu depan. Minggu depan mungkin kita akan masuk topik lain. Mudah-mudahan Ibu Wati bisa diskusi soal gender dan keluarga di kelas ini. Kemudian 2 minggu lagi kita akan ketemu lagi dengan Pak Kim dengan isu agama yang terkait dengan Theravada Buddhism, mainland of Southeast Asia, dan minggu berikutnya juga akan demikian dengan isu yang lebih luas lagi tentu. Dan kita akan akhiri kelas kita. Terima kasih.
Pak Rimbo, sebentar. Tadi di awal Bu Rina katakan nanti sebelum terakhir apa ya? Tadi ditulis di chat room.
Yang sebelum terakhir, waduh, saya harus balik lagi nih chatnya.
Saya udah nggak ada chatnya karena tadi ketutup mendadak.
Ya. Jadi pas kuliah, ini Bu Rina sebenarnya minta kita pada on cam semua. Kemudian, oke.
Ini YouTube-nya bisa dimatikan.
Ya, YouTube-nya ini recording sudah selesai, tapi YouTube masih on. Tetapi ya kita tidak ini. Oke, kalau waktu kita habis sekarang, mudah-mudahan yang lain yang belum sempat berkomentar sekarang di kelas-kelas berikutnya masih bisa menyiapkan materi dan menyiapkan pertanyaan, juga mengikuti materi dengan lebih seksama lagi. Terima kasih. Minggu depan kita akan dengar Ibu Wati diskusi tentang gender issue in Southeast Asia. Will you present it in Dutch or in English?
Let us see later. Oke.
Selamat
siang semuanya.
Terima kasih untuk semuanya.
Terima kasih Pak Rimbo.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Jun. Selamat siang.
Siang.
Terima kasih Pak.
Tutup.
Terima kasih Pak.
Terima kasih Pak. Selamat siang.